tremendously almost out of sight with such popularity. What was the click? What leveled this great rage for the Beatles?
Well, it's funny really, you mentioned that. I think it was the Palladium show, the television show in England, and then following hot in the footsteps, we had the World Variety Command Variety Performance. It's difficult to say that actually. World Variety Command Performance for the Queen Mother, and it all came up from there really. The national newspapers got hold of it, and they got on radio, and Mike Brown on the radio. But not a lot of things, a lot of columnists and things got onto the idea and started calling it Beatlemania.
What would you say Beatlemania is? That all the girls scream whenever they see you, and they perhaps faint waiting in line? Let's be immodest a moment. What is the attraction, huh?
I think it's our dressing gown. George's dressing gown is definitely a big attraction. No, I don't think any of us really know what it is. We've been asked this question an awful lot of times, but we've never been able to come up with an answer yet, because I think it's a collection of so many different things, like happening to be there at the right time, at the right moment, at the wrong thing. A little bit of originality in the songs, a little bit of a different sound. I don't know, it's an awful lot of things, maybe the gimmick of the haircut as well, the look, getting into the national press at the right time. So it's not an Olympic thing, but more.
Every year, thousands of people from around the world flock here to St. John's Wood, London, to have a look at this building right behind me, number 3, Abbey Road, which of course is Abbey Road Studios, where the Beatles recorded the bulk of their famous work together. More often than not, they'll also go just around the corner to 7 Cavendish Avenue, and pulling themselves up over the Great Stone Wall, will peek at the tiny third-floor room where John and Paul actually composed much of Sgt. Pepper and a lot of their other works. The Beatles always said that they didn't have any great talent, that they were simply more lucky than anything else, and worked hard to perfect their music as best they could. But so many years later, we now know better. There was definitely something within that music which continues to turn people on in a deep, meaningful way, even spiritual way. And that's what we're interested in here, the Beatles at the highest possible level. Not the rigors of, yeah, she loves you, Beatlemania, but something more introspective, something more intelligent, something more profound that the Beatles gave to an entire generation. Tumbling back through time to the heady, mythical 1960s to uncover the truth about the Beatles is risky business, for there are many skeletons buried there. The old bones of a bygone era conceived in great promise, but felled by unthinking excess, flamboyant materialism, evil politics, and the predatory, all-consuming monster, time. For here were 4 young men from north of nowhere, open to possibility and aching to succeed. Early on, Paul once commented that after he and John realized their songwriting afforded them the opportunity to write speedboats and big houses, they scooped up the spoils with both hands. But that was only the innocent beginning of their amazing trek. Ultimately, the Beatles meant much more. Inspired by grassroots performers like Buddy Holly, Bill Haley, and the lusty, exuberant Little Richard, they developed their own homegrown, tribal, teeny-bopper, parent-worrying music which carried within it the tiniest seed of a higher consciousness, bearing an incalculable boon for the artless post-50s generation about to receive it. For John Winston Lennon, a dreamy, lonely little boy from Liverpool's pasty middle-class suburbs, music was a calling, a way to express his frustration, isolation, and ultimate disdain for the pointless world of rules into which he was born. James Paul McCartney, too, found solace in his music. After the loss of his mother to breast cancer at 14, he picked up the guitar as a way to ease his sorrow. It was in this modest house at number 10 Forthland Road the young Lennon and McCartney banged out their first tentative chords together.
And they used to miss lectures and come down to the Jacaranda just to pick up hints on how to play the ukulele from the rest of the group. The Beatles in those days were virtually non-existent. I didn't even know that they were a group. To me they were just copy-ball layabouts.
They found a home at the Cavern on Matthews Street, only a few cobblestones from the grapes. Interestingly, the Beatles always insisted the concept of talent was a myth, and that their greatest inspiration came from somewhere deep within. In those early years, it was all they had, and they guarded it zealously. Best recalls the savage young Beatles' term in Liverpool and Hamburg.
We didn't have an awful lot of offers to become a manager. I'd handled the business side of it up till Brian became the official manager, even though Alan Williams had sort of been involved with us from an early day. But there weren't a lot of people coming up and saying, okay, we'll sign you up and we'll make you a star. Brian was the first real concrete offer, and who approached us in a good way and laid down what he could do for us, or what he hoped he could do for us. And I think that was one of the main reasons why we went with him. From my particular point of view, I think the guy I was closest to in the band had to be John. I'd known him for 2 years before I actually joined the band. I admired him as a person, I admired him as a friend, as a musician, a clown, a fighter, a lover, anything, so he was my forte in the band. We got along really great together, we had great times. To turn around and say, would you have any favourites, or who you least got on with? Most probably at that time, Paul would have been the hardest member of the band to get through to, simply because of the fact that he was a little bit different from the rest of us, in as much as that he wanted to attract all the attention. And by that I mean he wanted to be in the limelight all the time, where the rest of us used to just sort of turn around and say, okay, well, let's just go out and enjoy ourselves and have a lot of fun. Initially when we went out there, it was 7-8 hours a night, 7 days a week, about 15-20 minutes off. So we used to indulge in beer and booze and everything which could keep us going at that time. But we put a lot of impetus and energy into our music, so okay, it gets around about 2 o'clock in the morning. Once we've sort of played and blasted steam and, done whatever we had to do, it was a case of going out and enjoying ourselves. And it would always be a case of sort of linking up again. And we'd go out and have, normally after the show, there'd be, over to Harold's Cafe on the other side. And the old Hooners upper and bread and whatever else, a couple of bottles of beer. And then if Horse was with us, 9 times out of 10 he was, there'd be a case of going out and we'd most probably take in a couple of clubs, wander around, back the goats, get drunk, and then head back to wherever we went to. And it was a case